30 classic car experiments, so bad they're hilarious. Get ready to laugh, cringe, and wonder what on earth these automakers were thinking. In this video, we dive deep into 30 of the strangest, wildest, and most disastrous car experiments ever built. From bubble-top ovens to three-wheel disasters, tail fin monstrosities, failed futuristic dreams, and prototypes so ridiculous they never should have left the drawing board. You will discover designs that broke every rule of common sense, cars that were supposed to be revolutionary but turned out absurd, engineering ideas that looked genius on paper, until they hit the road. The hilarious fails that car companies wish you'd forget, whether you're a car lover, a nostalgia fan, or just someone who enjoys a good "what were they thinking" moment. This compilation will keep you entertained from start to finish. So buckle up as we explore the automotive Hall of Shame, a place where innovation went completely off the rails. In the cutthroat world of the auto industry, car makers have always been desperate to stand out in crowded markets. This desperation often led them down a path of bizarre experimentation, pushing the boundaries of design and engineering in ways that were more comical than commendable. From the post-war boom to the fuel-strapped 70s, companies threw everything at the wall to see what would stick. Unfortunately for them, most of it just slid down into a pile of forgotten, laughable failures. These weren't just cars. They were high-stakes gambles that backfired spectacularly, leaving behind a legacy of head-scratching decisions and automotive oddities that we can't help but find hilarious today. The styling departments of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s were truly the Wild West of automotive design. With seemingly no limits, designers were given free rein to sketch their wildest fantasies, resulting in some of the most bizarre design prototypes ever conceived. These weren't just flights of fancy. They were fully realized concepts that executives seriously considered putting on the road. Imagine boardrooms where chrome-laden spaceships with wheels were met with nods of approval. This era of unchecked creativity gave birth to vehicles that looked like they belonged in a sci-fi B-movie, with exaggerated lines, pointless adornments, and proportions that defied all logic. It was a time when more is more was the guiding principle, and subtlety was a word nobody in the design studio seemed to know. In a baffling attempt to capture two markets at once, some manufacturers tried to combine luxury and economy, creating automotive Frankenstein's monsters that failed spectacularly at both. The idea was to offer the prestige of a high-end vehicle with the running costs of a budget-friendly commuter. The reality was a car with cheap, plastic interiors disguised with fake wood grain, an engine that was too weak to carry the weight of its luxurious features, and a price tag that satisfied neither the budget-conscious buyer nor the luxury seeker. These vehicles ended up being a masterclass in compromise, delivering an uncomfortable ride, poor performance, and the distinct feeling of being cheated, no matter what you are looking for. They proved that you can't be all things to all people, especially when you're building a car. Aerodynamics became a buzzword in the mid-20th century, with designers convinced that slipperier shapes would lead to futuristic performance. However, their overly experimental aerodynamic designs frequently made cars less stable, not more. They sculpted bodies that looked sleek and fast while standing still. But once they hit highway speeds, these innovations turned into liabilities. Some cars would generate lift, making the front end feel light and disconnected from the road, while others were dangerously susceptible to crosswinds, turning a breezy day into a white-knuckle driving experience. Instead of cheating the wind, these cars were often bullied by it, proving that a design that looks good in a wind tunnel doesn't always translate to a safe or predictable machine on the open road. The promise of new materials like plastic and fiberglass inspired a wave of experimental bodies that were supposed to be lightweight, rust-proof, and cheap to produce. Car makers jumped on the bandwagon, creating vehicles with futuristic, seamless bodies that looked straight out of a World's Fair exhibit. The only problem: these early composites were nowhere near ready for prime time. The plastic or fiberglass bodies often cracked under minimal stress, sometimes from nothing more than a bumpy road or a door slammed too hard. They were brittle, prone to UV damage that made them fade and chalky, and offered next to no protection in a collision. These dream materials quickly turned into a maintenance nightmare, with owners discovering that their revolutionary car was, in fact, a fragile shell. Many of these weird and wonderful vehicles suffered from a fatal flaw: they had laughably underpowered engines. Designers would create a massive, heavy chassis loaded with futuristic gadgets and dramatic styling, only for the accounting department to insist on using a tiny, off-the-shelf motor to save costs. This created an awkward performance mismatch that was impossible to ignore. Imagine a car that looks like it can break the sound barrier, but struggles to merge onto a highway. The drone of a straining four-cylinder engine, trying to haul a 2-ton behemoth, became the sad soundtrack for these automotive failures. Performance was so sluggish, it was comical, turning every traffic light into a slow-motion drag race you were guaranteed to lose. Nothing screamed the future quite like the bubble top, a clear acrylic canopy that offered panoramic views and a cockpit-like feel. While they looked incredible on concept cars, these futuristic bubble tops often overheated passengers beyond tolerable temperatures. They essentially turned the car's cabin into a greenhouse on wheels, with the sun beating down relentlessly on the occupants. Air conditioning systems of the era were no match for the solar cooker effect, leaving drivers and passengers sweating in their seats. Glare was another major issue, making it difficult to see the road on a bright day. This visionary feature quickly proved that living inside a fishbowl was not the luxurious, futuristic experience automakers had promised. In the quest for innovation, some engineers decided that 4 wheels were one too many. Strange 3-wheel designs popped up, looking innovative and promising incredible efficiency. However, they almost universally proved to be dangerously unbalanced. Whether they had one wheel at the front or one at the back, these vehicles had a terrifying tendency to tip over during sharp turns, or even on uneven road surfaces. Their narrow track made them inherently unstable, turning every corner into a high-stakes balancing act. While they might have looked like the future of personal transport, their perilous handling dynamics relegated them to the footnotes of automotive history as a lesson in why some conventions, like having 4 wheels, exist for a very good reason. The dawn of the jet age had a profound influence on car design, but this inspiration often went too far. Attempts at jet-inspired styling frequently resulted in cars that looked more like oversized toys than serious vehicles. Designers slapped on non-functional jet turbine grills, rocket-shaped taillights, and fuselage-like bodywork. These elements were supposed to evoke speed and power, but without any actual performance to back them up. They just looked cartoonish and silly. These cars were the automotive equivalent of a child wearing a superhero costume all show and no go. They ended up looking more at home in a parade or a comic book than on the highway, a testament to styling that was completely detached from reality. Inspired by the success of cars like the Volkswagen Beetle, some American and European brands experimented with rear-engined layouts. Without fully understanding the principles of weight distribution, they simply moved the engine to the back, assuming it would create a more spacious cabin and better traction. The result was often a car with treacherous handling characteristics. With too much weight behind the rear axle, these cars were prone to violent oversteer, where the rear end would unexpectedly swing out during a turn. Unsuspecting drivers found themselves suddenly facing the wrong way on the road. This fundamental misunderstanding of vehicle dynamics created cars that were unpredictable and, in the wrong hands, downright dangerous. The future was supposed to be all about buttons, switches, and digital displays. In their race to create the cockpit of tomorrow, automakers produced some overcomplicated gadget-filled dashboards that confused drivers more than they impressed them. These control panels were a bewildering maze of identical-looking buttons, sliders, and early digital readouts that were often unreadable in sunlight. Simple tasks like turning on the radio or adjusting the climate control required consulting the owner's manual. Instead of feeling like a fighter pilot, the driver felt overwhelmed and distracted, trying to navigate a user interface that was anything but user-friendly. This push for technological flair proved that more gadgets don't necessarily make for a better driving experience. The tailfin craze of the late 1950s was a design trend that quickly spiraled into absurdity. Concept cars, free from the constraints of mass production, pushed this trend to its most extreme and ridiculous levels. Designers competed to create the biggest, sharpest, and most elaborate fins imaginable, turning cars into landlocked rockets. Some prototypes featured fins that were so tall they obstructed rear visibility, while others were adorned with multiple sets of fins, creating a chaotic mess of chrome and sheet metal. These exaggerated designs were the peak of automotive excess, serving no purpose other than to be shocking. They stand as a hilarious monument to a time when styling completely overshadowed common sense. Many of the most radical experimental prototypes were ultimately pointless because they were impossible to mass-produce. They were built with hand-formed panels, exotic materials, and complex mechanisms that could never be replicated on an assembly line at a reasonable cost. These cars were pure fantasy, created for the auto show circuit to generate buzz and excitement. While they succeeded in capturing the public's imagination, They offered no real solutions or viable ideas for future production vehicles. They were technological dead ends, expensive marketing stunts that highlighted a disconnect between the dreamers in the design studio and the pragmatists on the factory floor. The fuel crises of the 1970s sparked a desperate search for efficiency, leading to a host of inventions that often sacrificed comfort, safety, and common sense. These experimental vehicles were designed with a single-minded focus on miles per gallon, and everything else was secondary. This resulted in cars that were shockingly tiny, dangerously lightweight, and agonizingly slow. Comforts like sound insulation, decent seats, and basic safety features were stripped away to save weight. Some were so bizarrely shaped in the name of aerodynamics that they were barely recognizable as cars. These eco-experiments proved that while fuel efficiency was a noble goal, achieving it by creating an unsafe, miserable penalty box was not the answer. Suspension systems are a cornerstone of a car's ride and handling, but they're also an area where overambitious experimentation led to failure. Engineers developed experimental suspension systems using complex air, hydraulic, or electromechanical setups that promised a magic carpet ride. On paper, they were revolutionary. On the road, they tended to break much faster than standard proven parts. These systems were often too delicate for real-world conditions, with seals that leaked, compressors that failed, and electronics that glitched, leaving the car stranded or bouncing uncontrollably down the road. Owners discovered that their cutting-edge suspension was not just expensive to fix, but nearly impossible to find parts for. Designers have always been fascinated with unusual door designs, hoping to add a touch of drama and exotic flair. Gullwing, scissor, vertical, and sliding doors all made appearances on experimental cars, looking incredibly cool when they worked. The problem was, they often didn't. These complex mechanisms were prone to jamming, leaving occupants trapped inside or unable to get in. Seals were notoriously difficult to perfect, leading to constant water leaks and wind noise. They were also impractical in tight parking spaces and added significant weight and complexity. This experimentation proved that while a conventional car door might be boring, it is also reliable, weatherproof, and elegantly simple. The heart of any car is its engine, and this was another playground for radical experiments that often went wrong. Engineers toyed with rotary engines, gas turbines, and other unconventional power plants, hoping to find the next big thing. However, these experimental engines were frequently plagued with severe noise and vibration issues that made them completely unsuitable for a passenger car. They droned, whined, and shuddered, sending teeth-rattling vibrations through the entire chassis. They were also notoriously unreliable and inefficient, with issues like poor seals, high fuel consumption, and catastrophic failures. These noisy, shaky power plants were a reminder that a smooth, quiet engine is a luxury we often take for granted. In a truly baffling mashup of ideas, some companies attempted to merge boat and car concepts, leading to laughably bad amphibious vehicles. The idea of driving your car straight into a lake and cruising away sounds like something out of a spy movie, but the reality was far less glamorous. These car boats were terrible cars, and even worse boats. On land, they were slow, heavy, and handled like a bathtub on wheels. In the water, they were underpowered, difficult to steer, and prone to taking on water. They were the ultimate compromise, a vehicle that did two jobs very poorly instead of one job well, cementing their place as one of the silliest automotive experiments ever attempted. Interior innovations weren't just limited to dashboards. Designers also experimented with features like swivel seats and rotating dashboards, marketing them as the height of convenience and futuristic luxury. Swivel seats were supposed to make getting in and out easier, but they were often flimsy and developed an annoying wobble. Rotating dashboards that brought instruments closer to the driver were a neat party trick, but they were mechanically complex, and just another thing to break. These features were more gimmick than genuinely useful, adding complexity and cost without solving any real problems. They were quickly abandoned, proving that novelty for novelty's sake rarely stands the test of time. Ultimately, these 30 classic car experiments serve as a hilarious and cautionary tale. They prove that innovation, without a grounding in practicality, common sense, and user needs inevitably becomes comedy. These cars are the punchlines to jokes that automakers never intended to tell. They are rolling reminders that the boldest ideas are often the most flawed, and that the road to progress is paved with some truly spectacular, weird, and wonderful failures. They may have been disasters on the dealership floor, but today, They are celebrated relics that never fail to make us smile and say, what were they thinking?